Hey, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome back to Artist Alchemy. Today's a special interview for me because we have live with us on the interview program my son, Colin Reed. Colin, how are you?
I'm doing well. Thank you so much for having me. I'm really looking forward to it.
Oh, we're excited to have you here. Um, you live in Northern Virginia, and we talk pretty regularly, and I know it's been a challenge in your world um, as a music instructor, but in general, how are things in your life in the times of COVID-19?
It's been pretty wild. I feel like we kind of settled into a new normal just a little bit ago, and things are still moving, and there's still plenty of news abounding. But we've kind of settled into a bit of a rhythm here, and both myself and my wife know kind of what we're doing in terms of our work and in terms of how we're getting resources and all of those things, and we've kind of made a plan now. So it's still scary and it can still be intimidating, and um, we're very, very grateful, very fortunate that we're able to have kind of found a little bit of stability in this sort of wild, unstable time. But it's been it's been okay for us.
Good, good. Well, you're there and you're safe, and good for you. You're in a much more densely populated suburban and urban environment just outside Washington D.C., where you teach. Is there much of a movement there to open back up and get people back to work and returning to some kind of normal lifestyle? That's a prevalent theme here. We're kind of rural, as you know, but
Right.
what's the general uh, feeling there? Are people chomping to get out of the house or get back to work? Or
So it feels like here in Virginia, as you say, we're just south of Washington, and I really don't have a strong sense of what things are like in the city. I'm pretty removed from Washington just generally in my life. I mean, I typically get to work before the sun comes up, and I leave pretty early right after the school day ends. So even more so now that I'm not even going in then. So the kind of the vibe in the city is a little alien to me. Here in the burbs, um, our governor Northam has been fielding all kinds of questions and has been talking a little bit about things starting to open up. My wife works in healthcare, and they're talking about starting some additional services in the state of Virginia. Like hospitals will be allowed to perform, some certain non medically necessary procedures that they hadn't been able to do previously. We had, just like Michigan, we had a round of protests in the past couple of weeks down in Richmond, but that's an hour and a half from us here. That's pretty far away from us. So here
yeah,
in our suburbs has been pretty quiet. What I can see sort of from the community on our various social media platforms is everyone seems to still just be kind of finding their place. I am seeing a lot more chatter about, hey, do you have a landscaping recommendation? Like people are looking for small businesses in the community to continue with normal life. So I think that
good,
drive and that desire is definitely there. But
good.
I think we're all trying to stay safe too.
Yeah, no, absolutely. What about the Cherry Blossom Festival? This is about that time, isn't it? Have they reached their peak already? Do you know? I haven't looked it up.
Yeah, I mean, again, being far away from it, the festival proper in DC, my understanding is that they were not going to host anything. I mean,
Yeah.
clearly to sort of prevent the crowds. We've seen some really beautiful ones around the neighborhood.
They're
The
everywhere. The big
Yeah,
concentration for folks that might not be familiar with Washington D.C. around the Tidal Basin,
right.
right near the Jefferson Monument, the FDR Monument, and it's a rite of passage each spring, and families take the 2 mile lap around the pond, if you will, and the blooms on the cherry blossoms are just spectacular, and timing the peak depending on the temperatures. It's like a little bit of art and a little bit of science, and it's just a wonderful time of year to be in Washington.
We
So,
took our daughter for her first one last spring, so I'm glad we got
uh,
it. We hadn't been in years, probably since the
right,
last time you took me.
right,
And But yeah, we made sure, as a Washingtonian, you've got to have your cherry blossom festival. Very important.
yeah. So you're just to live up to our advertising. We said we were having an interview with a music educator. So
Yeah.
you're that and a lot more that we'll talk about in a bit. But let's just jump right in. I know you're in your home studio, and we talked a little bit before we went live about your your life as a music teacher on various virtual platforms. But talk a little bit about that. You're with Basis Charter School, Basis DC, which is a chain of charters around the country, I think headquartered out of Phoenix, right?
Yeah, that's correct.
And great organization, and I've visited your classrooms, and a wonderful school and great students. And you teach a variety of grade levels, but it's all online. So talk about it.
Yeah, so at the school, I'm the only music teacher. We are a 5 through 12, which is a fairly strange assortment of grade levels. So we do have both what we call a lower school and an upper school, so middle and high school. But sort of 5th, 6th, 7th, and then 8th and up is where our real divide is in terms of our student populations. And I potentially teach all of them. I teach the entire 5th grade, and then I become an elective in 6th grade. So 6th and 7th graders choose to be in my class or in art or in drama. And then in high school, it's a little more of a free-for-all, and I sort of cycle through a number of different courses that I offer. And students can sort of choose to sign up for those. As not, they don't have to take a fine art in high school. Our school made the decision quite early to jump onto completely digital learning. We started by moving our spring break. So we closed on March 13th, I think was our last day in the building. 16th for some teachers. That Monday the 16th, some teachers had to come in and make sure our technology was sorted. We all had laptops and that kind of thing. And then we took spring break early, a week early. And since then, we've been online. So for about a month and a half now, we've been doing completely digital learning. And as a teacher whose practice usually revolves around engaging students in a way that comes with immediate feedback, I sing a thing, you sing it back to me, and then we talk about it. It's been really difficult to sort of make this transition and maintain the integrity of my practice and what I do and what excites me about teaching music. So I think that, and I know some of our families have been feeling it too, that disconnect that comes from a digital platform has been really palpable. We mostly it's video lessons that we're doing. We have a few live sessions a week that we do. So today, for example, I had 3 different live sessions with 3 different groups of students. They've mostly been question and answer, because one of the things that we've been really sensitive to is the availability of technology and scheduling within households. So
is that an issue for you?
Yeah.
I was wondering. I think of you all being the big city and affluent, and out here we've got a lot of technology challenged families, and the school districts have done a great job in providing technology where they could. So you're facing those issues as well.
Oh yeah, so we have a ton of families. We have families from all 8 wards of the city. We're one of the most diverse student populations in Washington D.C., and so we have kids from all over the place, all different socioeconomic strata, all different walks of life, cultures, etc. We're really grateful that a lot of internet service providers were running programs at the beginning of this to make sure that families were connected for education and for work and for whatever. But there are certain familial situations where students might not have access to a computer until Saturday for the week because mom or dad is teleworking and needs the only computer in the house.
Oh, okay.
So even if they are connected, the availability of that connection is also an issue. And we have families who have really struggled to get on because of issues like food insecurity and not sure where the next meal is going to come from. So they're really struggling to balance all of that. And we've done a number of things to kind of reach out and bridge the gap there. But it's something we have to be aware of all the time. It's something that every time we make something for a student, we have to think, how is the student going to access this?
Yeah, one of our local music teachers and dear friend Gay Galvin teaches keyboard piano online currently, and it's just really a struggle. So that's a coast to coast, probably global issue for music educators. So how are you delivering lessons? You mentioned some videos that you create to get your students engaged.
Yeah, so as I said, we do some live sessions. So I have 1 live session a week with each of my courses. They're entirely optional though, and so it can't be a delivery mechanism for new content that I expect students to master, right? I can't say you have to learn this thing that I'm only going to show you here, because as I just mentioned, we cannot guarantee that a student will be able to access that. Right. So we've been doing entirely videos. And the way we structure it kind of differs from class to class. The way we deliver assignments differs from class to class. The nature of those assignments differs from class to class. I've been doing a lot of sort of music enrichment things because that's the easiest to access. So we sort of run this spectrum from difficult for students to achieve by themselves at home and really easy for students to achieve at home by themselves. It's really easy for a student to sit down and listen to a piece of music and tell me how they feel about it, right? In a structured way with guided questions or with some sort of prompt to lead their thinking in a certain direction or get them to sort of talk about the aspects of the music that I want them to talk about. And that's all things that builds on things that we did in the school year anyway, right? That's supplementary to what we've been working on all year. And then the opposite end of the spectrum is performance, right? Like, how do we put on a live performance? How do I teach you to sing a song in a digital platform? And of course, like, I can generate videos all day long that show that play the notes for you and have the accompaniment built into the video track. And I've got a conducting track that they can follow along with and all those kinds of things. But at the end of the day, it's really difficult in a field where something that we've come to rely on, something that's really built into the process, is that immediate feedback loop. And I'm sure your keyboard teacher who was chiming in earlier can attest to this. It's one thing to listen to them play. It's quite another thing to be able to watch their fingers and see exactly how they're approaching the keyboard. Not just are they playing the right note at more or less the right time, but what are they doing with their body? How are they engaging the right muscles and working their diaphragm in the right way to get not just sound, but quality sound, right? Because
I hadn't even thought about that physical aspect of performance. Yeah, wow.
It's huge. And so, one of the things we decided early on was that we weren't going to do video for the most part. We've got a few extracurricular things that families can opt into for video, but just in terms of protecting students and protecting their rights, we opted out of video pretty early on. So now I'm faced with an even greater challenge of not being able to use a lot of the resources that would let me, have students download an app and, if they have a device to download it on, have students download an app that automatically syncs audio and video for us, and bam, cool, we've got a performance, right? Instead, I've got to get only audio from them and build in some way for us to sync it up. So yeah, it's been really difficult to do this type of work, which is so dependent on communication, on a discourse. It's what it's all about.
Well, you and I know so many of the teaching artists or teaching educators, music educators that we know are rising to the challenge and doing the best you can. Talk to me about how you keep music instruction, relevant, because you're dealing with, they're not all hardcore music students, I know. But you've talked over the years that you've been teaching about just some of the popular music that you infuse, into your lessons, and what are the kids listening to, or how do you use that as an engagement tool?
Yeah, it's a really great way for students to feel like they're part of the curriculum, right? To open those doors and to provide opportunities for them to share what they're loving with me has been really, really important in terms of informing my practice. I've been at this school for the last 4 years, been doing classroom teaching for 4 years now. And over that time, it's developed dramatically to the point now where my 6th grade, which is a history course, and we have a number of topics that are important topics that we need to hit and make sure that we discuss, but are mostly centered around Western classical music. And I said, hey, why can't we shrink that down a little bit, make sure we talk about all those things, and we want to get those great composers in.
Sure.
But we're spending the entire reading. Oh yes,
Beethoven,
Mozart, and all those folks.
I got him here. Yeah. All right.
Yes, you got them.
Bunch of dead white guys, right?
Yes. In fact, I refer to it in my classroom as dead white guy music, which is really important for, again,
no offense.
to laugh about things. Hey,
we love them.
It's important sometimes when working with young people to acknowledge the thoughts that they're having and to specifically indicate that those thoughts are valid, right? There's nothing wrong with telling a student that the things that they are thinking or feeling are okay, as long as you're doing that in a way that is balanced and reasonable and developmentally appropriate. So yeah, it's dead white guy music, and the kids get a laugh out of it, and I get a laugh out of it, and we still talk about Mozart and how amazing he was, right? That doesn't hinder the educational process in any way.
Yeah, so you're not force feeding them the old school. You put it out there, and and engage on the basis of what their interests are. And
well, giving them that too, right? It's about balancing both. My approach in the last 4 years has been music is music. And the vocabulary that we use to talk about Mozart is in almost every way exactly the same vocabulary that we talk about the Beatles, and exactly the same vocabulary that we use to talk about Kendrick Lamar, and exactly the same vocabulary that we talk about music. It's music. Music is music. It's all rhythm. It's all harmony. It's all melody. It's all dynamics and timbre, right? All these words apply equally to Ravi Shankar as they do to Schubert, right? It's all the same.
And I know you're a Carly Rae Jepsen fan. So.
Oh yeah, the new album is just so good, so good. So we spent, in my 6th grade class, we spent GP5 talking about the last grading period. We have 5 grading periods in our lower school. But the last one is the history of popular music. So we've been talking about blues and jazz and rock and pop and country. And in my 7th grade class, we're talking about music and media. So we've been talking about film music, and we've been talking about music and video games and interactive media. So it's really about sort of finding what they're passionate about and using that to teach the specific content, but also the skills that I want them to learn.
So let's talk a little bit about your education and early influences. I know back in the day, I lived in Washington with the family for 20 years, and before I decided to move back to California, and we went to a lot of concerts. Funny you mentioned Ravi Shankar. I don't know if you went to that one or not, but I heard Ravi Shankar play live at the National Cathedral. With his daughter, not Nora Jones, but Anushka
Shankar,
yeah, and that was one of the life-altering concerts for me. Here's this musician playing East Indian inspired music in this house of Western Christian worship. It was just like stunning culture mashup.
Were fantastic with sitar in a cathedral.
Oh my gosh, it was just phenomenal. But what early live music events do you remember?
So there's a few that I think back on, and when I was reading over the kind of run a show for this evening, I was thinking a lot about it, and the ones that keep coming up over and over and over again were all the shows that we went to at Wolf Trap. Wolf Trap being the great sort of concert venue here in Northern Virginia. It's actually very close to where we live now, and a little closer even than it was when we were in Maryland, outside of Washington, and it's fantastic. They have a huge outdoor venue. It's a traditional concert hall, but there's no back wall. It's an open grass, and it's amazing. And that's where they get the big acts. And we saw some really incredible stuff there, like Whole Planets hosted by Leonard Nimoy. That was cool.
Yeah.
Or the ones I always think of are when we saw the Gypsy Kings 100 times.
I was going to say that was hard. I took you. You were very young, and then very loud.
I remember cowering in the stands because
the volume was a bit much. But
then also they opened the Barns, the small, more intimate venue that had a little restaurant attached, and really, really charming little space where we saw Richie Havens of all people, incredible Joe Bonamassa.
I was going to say the great blues guitarist Joe Bonamassa. He pops up all the time on public television out here, and
he's still huge, just a monster.
Yeah. Oh, it's great stuff. Such a culturally rich place, and we got a lot of great musicians out here doing good things. And our only large outdoor venue like Wolf Trap is the Toyota Amphitheater, and they got a lot of great acts through there. Hard Rock Hotel and Casino opened up last year, and as soon as they get open, I know they're going to have a lot of shows. And then we've got our local music scene too, with a lot of live music going on. In fact, speaking of virtual performances, there's a whole series of what they're calling couch concerts going on, and every night it's 3 or 4 different musicians coming on, playing 15-minute sets, and just really doing a great job keeping live music active in the community. So we appreciate all the work that those musicians are doing. So looking back even further, or maybe during those early concert times at Wolf Trap, when did you decide or think you might want to be a musician and ultimately a composer?
Much later. Oh yeah, like I tell my students all the time, especially my youngest students, my 5th and 6th graders, I tell them all the time, you know much more about music now than I did when I was your age. And I think that's true, right? I think there's something, at least in the technical aspect of reading notes and knowledge about harmony. I learned to play guitar when I was in middle school. I want to say around 13 is when I picked up guitar because one of my friends was playing guitar and he was like, "Hey, guitar is cool. You should play guitar." He was right. Guitar is very cool. And
you started with acoustic, right?
Acoustic, yeah. I still have my big white acoustic.
Big white, yeah.
Over here. Great guitar. Yeah, I started with acoustic guitar, and I was taking lessons at the Guitar Center. We tried to get me enrolled in a class at school, but they were already advanced to some degree. I needed to already know how to read music as a prerequisite, and I didn't know that at that point. Yeah. So I took classes and had a fantastic guitar teacher there, right. Really cool jazz cat, Kevin Middleman, he's still around. He's still doing stuff. See him pop up on social media every once in a while. Really, really great influence on me. And so I did that for a couple of years, and then I ended up actually joining the guitar class at school. And I learned to read, and I had so many questions. You know, there was a lot of guitar playing, obviously, and sort of learning music from that standpoint, but also a lot of kind of general music thrown in. And I hadn't really had general music since really elementary school because I was more of a drama kid in middle school. I did theater and all the plays there. And so having sort of general music again, I got really, really excited about some of the things I was hearing. And I took our AP Music Theory. I was fortunate enough that my high school offered a number of AP courses, and including music theory. And I took that class because I had all these questions no one could answer. And I just loved it. Like I was just totally immersed in it. And I would go to the library across the street. I don't know if you remember this. I would go to the library across the street from the high school, and I would take like big grocery tote bags. And the maximum number of items you could take out of the library at a time was 50. So I would go and I would check out 50 CDs. I would go home, I would download them all onto the computer, listen to them for hours and hours and hours and hours. And the next day I would take them back and get 50 more. And I would just do it all over again. And I ended up with just days and days of music that I spent just washing over me.
Binging.
Yeah, and my theory teacher was also the choral director. And the choral director, Mr. Indovino. Yeah, Justin Indovino. Amazing teacher. University of Maryland graduate who came and did work with us. He's up in New York now, doing some middle school stuff. Last I saw, and he was the choral director. And choral directors always need guys, so I was voluntold that I was going to join his chorus. It was not optional, and I'm so glad I did, because that experience of being in the music to being part of the music, right? When you hold a thing in front of you and you make motions that make music, that's one type of experience. But when the music is literally coming out of you, it's very, very different. And being in a chorus where you can all stand in a circle together and you're hearing everything around you and you're feeling their resonance and your resonance, like it's about as spiritual as I get personally. And it's really was incredibly powerful and had a great effect on me. Also learned a ton of great repertoire and a ton of great composers. And that was what kind of pushed me over the edge to say, human beings made this, maybe I can too.
And that was your introduction to the great choral composer Eric Whitacre, right?
Oh yeah. We did Cloudburst in high school, which is it's in Spanish. It's a Pablo Neruda poem, I believe. And it's gorgeous. It's a really, really cool. Lots of like technical special effects with, snapping to simulate rainfall and stuff like that. Which typically doesn't do it for me. I'm not a huge fan of choralography and sort of like making more of a show out of it. I'm a little more into the music itself, but man, it's really effective in that piece. And yeah, Whitacre blew my mind, and I dove right into that.
Well, and you introduced him to me, and I thank you for that forever. But I've always loved one of the early pieces, his early setting of the E. Cummings poem. I thank you, God,
for this amazing day.
This amazing day. So,
yeah.
Any choral music fans out there, if you don't know Eric Whitacre, Whitacre, do yourself a favor and look him up. He's doing another virtual choir with participants from around the world. I think this is his 6th. He was definitely ahead of his time. Before we needed to do virtual stuff, he was doing it. So amazing guy. So you left high school, you got out of there, did a little side trip to University of Maryland, but it turned out to be you really wanted to learn composition, and that was more of a performance-based program. So,
yeah. It turns out the big university programs really lean that way. They want you to to start as a performer and then transition into composition. And I really stopped playing guitar, and I wasn't much of a singer at that point. I loved being the chorus, but I wasn't going to audition to sing in their opera program. So I was kind of left without a way to get in. But I went for history and classics and had a little bit of fun, but it wasn't music. So
not a good fit. Yeah. So then you wound up at Montgomery College, wonderful 2-year school right there in Rockville, Maryland, and met some great people there that really made a difference and ultimately paved the way for you getting into the Johns Hopkins School of Music, the Peabody Conservatory, right?
Yeah. So University of Maryland led to Montgomery College, which we were living there in Rockville at the time. It was very convenient and turned out to be an amazing program. And I was so glad that I ended up there, where there was a little lower stakes and I had a chance to kind of stretch out and really, really dig into things. And I met a couple of really amazing performers and composers and teachers there. Our choral director, Molly Donnelly, was unbelievable. We did some really incredible work and got some really great opportunities out of that. And then my composition teacher there, Justin Boyer, he was a student at Peabody. So I had, a little nudge in that direction in terms of when I was thinking about where I'd like to continue my education. That was kind of a big step in that direction, just knowing that he had come from there. Really great theory teacher, really great composer, really technical composer, who I was really glad let me kind of pursue composition the way that I wanted to pursue composition. A lot of programs really, you're gonna write X piece by Y date because you have to build a portfolio that has, Z stipulations, and it's kind of a, it's kind of a cookie cutter program that they push you through. Peabody was much more open than that, and Justin, having come from there, was certainly in line with that and sort of guiding me to find my own sort of path through things and giving me prompts when I needed an assignment to find inspiration and leaving me the heck alone when I needed to just kind of explore and play with stuff and figure things out on my own. And there's a lot of little nuggets of wisdom that I still come back to in my writing and in my teaching. He took a very kind of sculptural approach to composition, which I still take, which is a lot of times what I need to do is just get something on the page and just write, and just, it's a mess, and that's fine, because later I'm going to go back and really edit and tweak, and you gradually take this block of an idea and whittle away and chip away until you find the piece of music in between.
Is that the composition equivalent of like stream of consciousness in writing? You just sort of put it out there and...
Well, it's an approach that I think actually really lines up with some of those composers we mentioned earlier when we talk back to the sort of great composers. There's a fantastic book by Aaron Copland, the great American composer, called What to Listen For in Music. And one of the things he talks about in one of the early chapters is the types of composers. And of course, I can't possibly remember exactly the words he uses, but one of the types of composers that he describes is a composer who edits a lot, a composer who takes an idea and spends a ton of time crafting it into just the most perfect little musical idea. And Beethoven is a composer like this. We have pages and pages and pages of Beethoven manuscripts with stuff crossed out in a new version and crossed out in a new version. He was a big editor, and he was all about the craft and the process. You have composers like Mozart who would sit down and write out a 30-minute symphony, one draft, no big deal, done. But that's extremely rare, right? Like that's not the typical compositional style. Most of us are much more like Beethoven, where you have this idea, this nugget of an idea, and the composition is all about, what can I do with this? How can I manipulate this to get every facet of it exposed at some point? Yeah,
wonderful. So it was a great experience at Peabody Conservatory, based right in downtown Baltimore, and you're only a couple hours from New York, the epicenter of art and culture, and at least the Western Hemisphere, if not the world. One of them anyway. Yeah. Great place. And some of the amazing people you worked with there, like Pulitzer Prize winner Kevin Putz. Was he your primary composition teacher? Or?
Yeah. So a lot of folks, will go to a particular school, and this is certainly true of music, and those who have studied music at the collegiate level and above will know this, as performers at least. When you you have weekly lessons with a teacher. So if you're going as a flute performer, once a week you'll meet with the flute teacher and they'll go over whatever repertoire you're working on, etc. And composition's much the same. And the way that programs typically handle composition is as a performance. So you have kind of like your music education students, and you have like your music administration, your arts administration students, and then you have your performers, and composers are kind of lumped in there. So we have weekly lessons, and this is true at Montgomery College too, where you meet with your teacher and you go over what you've been working on for the week. And sometimes it's very little and they're quick, and sometimes it's a lot, and you've worked together to kind of whittle it down. But yeah, my primary teacher there was Kevin Putz. We had a number of other great faculty there as well. The chair of the department while I was there, Michael Hirsch, really amazing composer, and Oscar Bettison from England, really amazing composer, Princeton trained, really great. But yeah, Kevin Putz was really amazing to work with, and I was so glad that I was placed with him. He's not someone who I was very aware of before going in. I knew the name just from some research about the school, but listening to his music, I think aesthetically we aligned the best. And then in terms of his process, he did this thing where you would like play something for him or show him an idea, and he would just kind of stare at the wall for a little while, and then he would like look up and just say the most brilliant, perfect nugget of exactly what you needed to hear, right? He was that kind of, just sort of in his mind kind of crafting it, and then just it came out flawless, right? And it's an amazing composer.
Were you at Peabody when he wrote the commission for the Minneapolis Opera, the Silent Night opera that he wrote?
Yeah, so he won the prize, or the piece won the prize, Silent Night, which is about the Christmas Day armistice in World War I. It's actually based on a movie, called Joyeux Noël.
Joyeux Noël, yeah, beautiful film.
Yeah, and the score is just stunning. It's in 3 different languages.
I've seen it. No, it's beautiful.
It's astonishing. Yeah, and yes, we were at Peabody. I was at Peabody while he was working on that piece. I have a recollection of talking to him after the piece had won the prize, and him like telling me about how that conversation goes, like when the phone rings and it's the Pulitzer Committee or whoever. Yeah, so I'm quite sure that he won it while I was there too, probably in my 3rd year or so. Exciting,
learning from some great people.
Yeah.
So you finished up at Peabody Conservatory and then went right off to Shenandoah Conservatory in Winchester, Virginia. Was it a master's in composition or MFA or what?
So it's a master's in composition. The program there, again, you sort of have especially after you finish your undergraduate degree, there are a few different avenues you can go, and different programs sort of highlight different things. So, for example, you can get a D.Mus, a Doctor of Music, or you can get a PhD. Depending on which program you go to, you might have multiple options. So I have a Master's in Music at MUs from Shenandoah Conservatory, which is part of the Shenandoah University, very small school in Winchester, out in the middle of nowhere on Highway 81, like in the Shenandoah Valley between the mountains. And I followed a teacher there. When I was at Peabody, we had a visiting artist come and do a presentation. Every week we had composition forum, which was the entire composition department, so 40 of us or so, and the faculty would come together, and usually with some presentation, either we would occasionally have a visiting artist, or one of the faculty would discuss their own work, or we would have like a doctoral candidate perform something that they were working on as part of their doctoral work they had to present to the forum. Sometimes it was like on a specific topic, like a composition topic, but mostly it was just sort of like, hey, here's a really amazing artist you should know about. Let's talk about their work and play some stuff and talk about it and argue about it a little bit, and those sorts of things. And so David T. Little.
That was David T. Little, right? That's
right. He was still doing his doctoral work at Princeton, and he came by to present on the work that he had done in the intersections of music and politics, was something he was very interested in. And so he was in town because he was having a piece performed by the Baltimore Symphony Orchestra. He wrote a piece. He was commissioned by them to write a piece by Marin Alsop, the music director there, or was the music director there. And so he was in town, and he stopped by because he knew it's a very small world, actually, the composers. And he knew Kevin and Oscar and a few of the other folks there. And so he stopped by and presented, talked to us about like work songs and sort of the origins of like musical propaganda, and talking about you know, sort of like folk and resistance music. And
Oh, did he? I was going to say, did he get to the Peter,
yeah.
Paul and Mary and
Oh yeah.
Woody Guthrie kind of stuff? Yeah.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And so we talked a lot about those sort of intersections, and he himself does a lot of work in sort of intersections with politics as well. So his sort of really massive breakout piece was a few years ago. He wrote an opera called JFK, which is not quite the sort of bio piece that we would expect from like Nixon in China, John Adams, and a little more abstract and a little wilder. I honestly have not had the opportunity to see it. But it was very well received, and yes, he is still very much working in that vein. But when I heard his work and when I heard what he was all about, and got to talk to him a little bit, I was totally hooked, and I knew I had to study with him. So I tracked him down and found where he was teaching. And the school was small, and you know, I was kind of on this major conservatory high, but I just knew I had to work with David Little. So
good. Oh, what an exciting opportunity to be able to follow him there and then get into the school and do what you do. I was trying to remember before we decided to do this call, and I put all my notes together. And what was the play that you wrote the musical soundtrack for? Was it Trojan Women?
Yeah, Trojan Women by Aeschylus. And
you took a whole Greek tragedy and had to score it. I mean, what a neat thing.
Yeah,
one of my enough to see the live performance.
Yeah, one of my great friends in graduate school when I was studying there at Shenandoah knew the director of theater there, also in the conservatory. I had no interactions with kind of the rest of the, you know, I knew some performers from classes, and we were working together on musical projects, but I hadn't had a chance to go see, you know, some of the amazing dramatic works that we were putting on there as well. But I got connected to this friend based, you know, she offered him the opportunity, and he was booked on another project. I was really excited to accept. I'd never done any like real theater work. I'd done some smaller like song cycles and things, kind of dramatic in nature, but nothing like this. So what the project ended up being was they needed backing score. I wrote a few little songs, like there's some moments where characters are kind of in their own heads or have sort of lost their minds a little bit, and those the director wanted to turn into songs to sort of represent that change in mental state. So we did actually write some songs for it, but mostly it was just score. It was incidental music, is what we call the score for a theater production, and it was all electronic. So that was another kind of learning opportunity for me too. I'd been writing acoustic music. It was the first time that I really got to dive into electronic music production and sort of learn some of those tools as well.
Oh, so neat, bringing your theater and music worlds together. It was really outstanding and just a beautiful production all the way around. You know, I skipped right over a big part of your experience at Peabody Conservatory. While you were there, you actually spent a semester or at least a few months in Singapore at the Yang So Tao Conservatory of Music.
Yeah.
You want to talk about that a little bit, and then that'll be kind of a segue. And I think Sam's got a piece that you wrote while you were there that was performed called Elegy, and we can pop that up in a minute. But talk about that experience.
Yeah, so the opportunity arose because Yang So Tao Conservatory at the National University of Singapore came to Peabody administration when they were first developing plans for their building and their curriculum and everything. And asked them for help, asked them, you know, how do you make a conservatory, basically. And so Peabody and Yang So Tao had this long-standing collaboration and work and working together. And there's all kinds of like really interesting things, like just walking around the building. It's fascinating being in, you know, Peabody is a number of buildings in downtown Baltimore that were not designed for the purpose. Even the you know, the titular Peabody Library there was not specifically music oriented at any point.
It's pretty fabulous, though.
Yeah, oh, it's incredible. But you know, George Peabody wanted to be a center of learning for all disciplines, not anything in particular. It only became music later. So being in a building that was designed for music was wild. All the hallways are super wide so that two pianos can pass each other in the hallway. Yeah, like weird stuff like that, where it kind of feels a little alien, and then someone explains it to you, and you're like, oh yes, it's a music building, of course.
Sure.
So that was a really interesting experience. Yeah, and I had a bit of a tough time there, just psychologically, emotionally, being kind of a fish out of water. And Singapore is a beautiful country, and they were really wonderful and very warm. Easy to get around as a Westerner. Everything's in English, which is great. They have 4 main languages, and one of them is English. So every street sign is in English, in addition to the 3 others. Yeah, and very modern, very well air conditioned, which was especially important on the equator.
I remember following the weather on my weather map. It was like, you know,
you could set your watch. You could set your watch by the 4:30 thunderstorm.
Oh, yeah,
it was crazy every single day. Yeah, it was a really amazing experience, and I'm so glad that I took. But it was really tough at the time, and creatively it was tough too. I sort of found myself not quite knowing what to do, what to work on. I felt like I had very little direction there. But the teacher I was working with, Ho Chi Kong, was really wonderful and really kind of let me explore some things. And I met up with this fantastic violinist Adelia and this pianist Lawrence, and they were really kind enough to work with me and play this piece, which I think is I wrote a few things there, and I think this is kind of the one out of that period. Like this is the piece that I still think about and I still think holds up after 8 years. But yeah, it was a tricky time, and I'm glad something really fruitful came out of it. So
well, let's listen to a little bit of Elegy by Colin Reed. It starts pretty soft, so feel free to crank up your volume. Felt terribly guilty cutting it off halfway through, but it's a beautiful, beautiful piece. I hope you don't mind the comparison. Is there a little bit of Arvo Pärt in there?
Yeah, I mean, I was listening to a lot of Pärt, and Elegy is actually the name of a piece for brass ensemble by Putz. I mean, it's a word, but I was definitely thinking of Putz
Yeah.
when I was working on that piece. He has a really beautiful piece for violin and piano called Aria, which is really gorgeous. That I was thinking about, being a little homesick maybe. And yeah, I mean, it was a time when I was sort of playing with register, lots of super high notes and really, really low notes in the piano, and kind of playing around with that as a compositional idea and a way to flow through a piece.
You want to hear the remaining couple of minutes on YouTube, Elegy by Colin Reed. So
yeah,
please enjoy. So Shenandoah Conservatory was a pretty amazing, powerful experience. I was fascinated while you were there because not only David T. Little, but some of the other New York-based composers and musicians from the East Coast that would come out. It's about an hour and a half west of Washington, D.C., so it's not totally remote. I mean, you're out in the country there, the Blue Ridge Mountains, Shenandoah Valley, beautiful, beautiful country. But these amazing musicians would make the trek and do residencies. Is that where you met Eric Whitacre? You actually met one of your childhood idols?
Yeah. So they the advantage of going with a teacher instead of a program sometimes is that you also get all the people that teacher knows. So David T. Little was really good friends with some unbelievable composers. He started a program there where we would invite out Pulitzer Prize winners. So I got to hang out with David Lang, really, really amazing. Jennifer Higdon came through.
Right.
Yeah, it's just a really, really amazing opportunities. And we did master classes with them and showed them our work and things like that. And then, so 2-year master's program at Shenandoah. And in the start of my second year, we got a new teacher. David actually left. The commute from New York was a little much. And he decided that he needed to sort of stay up in New York while he was working on some of these major opera commissions and things like this. So I was fortunate enough to be part of the committee that hired the new composition teacher. I got to pick my teacher from a pool of candidates, which was crazy and not a thing that a lot of people get to do. And the guy who we ended up getting is Jonathan Newman, who is a fantastic composer in his own right. Does a lot of work for wind ensemble, for concert band. Is his main kind of bag, but he is old friends with Eric Whitacre. They went to Juilliard together, and so and they did a lot of collaborations early on. The two of them and Stephen Bryant, really fantastic composer, again mostly wind ensemble stuff, and Jim Bonney, a really amazing guitar player and composer, and who also does like a ton of like production work for video games. And Jim Bonney's all over the place. He's really amazing, Chicago based. And so because Newman knew Whitacre, when it was time for Whitacre to come into town, or Whitacre was coming into town, he was working on a project with NASA of all things. He was doing some music for a documentary program that they were working on about the Hubble telescope, I believe. I don't know if this thing ever got off the ground, but he was going from DC, where he was talking to NASA, to West Virginia University, and he needed a ride, so he stopped in.
Did you raise your hand immediately?
Right, yeah, he stopped in Winchester for a little bit. Winchester's about 2/3, maybe a quarter of the way from Washington to West Virginia University, and where he was going to do like a clinic with their choirs and stuff. And so he stopped by. He did the masterclass lesson, whatever. We had lunch and like did the whole thing with the whole composition department. It was great. And then I rented a car and drove Eric Whitacre, my 10 years earlier, my hero, my idol. I drove him to West Virginia University and then turned around and drove back to Winchester. It was crazy.
Wow.
He was delightful, very sweet man.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I love following him on Instagram. He's a great photographer. He takes these wonderful photos and
very active
world traveler, and just isn't he what is he, artist in residence for the LA Master Chorale? Or
yeah, he's been doing that for a few years now. He also has his own ensemble, the Eric Whitacre Singers. They've been doing stuff for a long time. He's a Nevada raised guy, so
University of Nevada, Las Vegas originally.
Yeah,
right?
He's based out of LA now, but he does a lot of work with folks out there. So like some of his earliest stuff was these really amazing albums that came out with the BYU singers at Brigham Young University. Great choral program. He's got a couple albums of really fantastic work with them. But yeah, so he's a monster. It was so cool.
Have fun being able to meet a childhood idol like that.
Yeah.
Oh gosh, how exciting! So all of that kind of loads up into that whole arena of contemporary classical music, and
Yeah.
whether it's opera or choral music, there's so much of that going on that I know to us in the general public, unless I had you as my point of entry into that world, I would know nothing about it. It's fascinating because there's so much great stuff going on out there, and you kind of have to go out and look for it. It's just enriched, I know, my life so much, and hearing you talk about it and the programs you've worked on, and I know one of the opportunities you've taken advantage of is your affiliation with Rhymes with Opera in New York City. I love the name, Rhymes with Opera. Like, what rhymes with opera? Well,
Exactly.
nothing.
Nothing. That's right.
But talk a little bit about that. We got to be a little mindful of the time here in our 10 minutes remaining,
Sure.
because we do want to listen to a little clip of your piece that was premiered there last year in New York City.
Yeah. So way back, Rhymes with Opera folks are Peabody alum. So
it is connected to Peabody. I forgot.
I didn't know them there, but that is the connection. They were all finishing up graduate work when I was there doing my. There we are, sitting on stage in New York. That's actually before a concert with Rhymes with Opera. None of those folks are Rhymes with Opera folks. The first thing that really connected me with them was I took an opportunity while I was at Peabody. They have a program called the Pocket Opera Workshop, with the very unfortunate acronym of POW. And they do, it's a summer program. It's like a 6-week program, composers and singers, and they hire an ensemble, which was pretty random. It was like a couple strings and a couple winds, and it was kind of a mix of stuff. And our mission was to write a piece and then perform it. So the composers in the program were paired with singers. I actually think I had 3 singers that I worked with while I was there. This was years ago now. And it was an amazing experience. Like, we got to get feedback in real time from these singers while we were writing pieces for them and their specific voices, which is not something I'd done before. I mean, I had friends perform my works, but like a really direct, immediate collaboration with other people in more or less real time was crazy. It was really cool. And the show we put on at the end of the 6 weeks was just phenomenal. And it was a really great opportunity to work with those guys and get to know them a little better. And they did, throughout the weeks, it wasn't all work time. It was presentations on various things and ensemble building and like all kinds of other things. It was really amazing. And I do, quick plug for them, they are doing another one soon. I don't know how they're doing it, but it's something to look out for if they make any of it available so that folks on the West Coast would be able to see it. But yeah, the Pocket Opera Workshop by Rhymes with Opera, really awesome program. So then I actually took a class with Ruby Fulton, one of the composers who works with them, and also one of the members of their board. And while we were at Shenandoah, so there's a Peabody connection and also a Shenandoah connection to Rhymes with Opera. She taught a number of courses there as an adjunct professor and was fantastic. I loved working with her so much. I got the really incredible opportunity to write them a piece a few years later. It was a project that sort of floated around for a number of years. They asked me to write the piece, and it was going to be on a particular program, but then something fell through with something else, and it got pushed back, and they had to change the ensemble a little bit, and all these things that come from working with professional musicians, particularly in a place, I'm sure you experience this all the time in your arts community, but all over the world, this is an issue where things happen and logistics change, and you've got to be adaptable and play with things. And it's not just, I've poured my heart and soul into this creative thing, now do it for me, right? It's really a give and take, and it's really about being able to collaborate and work with others. So I was so fortunate to work with these folks over a few years and write them a very short piece, about 10 minutes total. They gave me almost no stipulations other than it's 10 minutes total, and here's the ensemble.
Wow.
And so they've got a small chamber orchestra they work with, 8 pieces, 10 pieces, a small group, a couple strings and winds, piano. And it was really, really cool to be able to put together a piece for them, but, so open-ended. I knew I wanted to be theatrical because we had talked about how it was going to be staged. And I ended up settling on kind of a dramatic song cycle. So the piece is called On Solitude and Loneliness, and it's about sort of the dichotomy of being alone and enjoying that, right? The nice things that we get out of loneliness, and being alone and the negative things that come out of that, the fear or the discomfort or the desire to be with others, or those aspects of loneliness as well, and how those things are two sides of the same coin, and how those things interact with one another. And you know, there's the poetry that I ended up choosing for it really tackled all of those aspects I felt, and really fit with some purely technical compositional stuff that I was messing with at the time. But the highlight was really getting feedback with them and going up to New York and working with them there.
How timely for our shelter-in-place issues that we're all dealing with right now. With that as a wonderful introduction, let's listen to a little bit of On Loneliness and Solitude by Colin Reed.
Instead of sleep,
I love that staging. It's so effective for that piece, and those voices are just stunning.
Yeah, they did really incredible work. I was not part of the staging process at all, which was kind of interesting to sort of walk into the performance and be just as surprised a bit the way
watch your baby come to life.
It was cool.
Shifting gears abruptly, as I'd mentioned to you earlier, April is National Poetry Month. Do you happen to have a poem you'd care to share with us?
I do, yeah. It's one of my favorites, actually, and one that gets set to music fairly often. My favorite version is by Rufus Wainwright.
Oh.
Yeah, son of Loudon.
Sonnet? One of the sonnets?
Yeah, one of the sonnets, exactly right. Exactly
right. Love Rufus. Yeah. We love Rufus.
Yeah, so I've got here Sonnet 43.
Oh.
When most I wink, then do mine eyes best see, for all the day they view things unrespected. But when I sleep, in dreams they look on thee, and darkly bright are bright in dark directed. Then thou, whose shadows doth make bright, how would thy shadows form happy show to the clear day with thy much clearer light, when to unseeing eyes thy shade shines so. How would, I say, mine eyes be blessed made, by looking on thee in the living day, when in dead night thy fair imperfect shade through heavy sleep on sightless eyes doth stay. All days are nights to see till I see thee, and nights bright days when dreams do show thee me. So good. So good. And so musical. I mean, the sonnets are perfect little, it's amazing. So good.
I got to run for my Rufus Wainwright recordings right after this.
Oh, it's amazing. So good.
That's a beauty. I know going to all those Shakespeare birthday parties at the Folger Library would pay off. You've been instilled with a love of the bards.
It worked. It worked.
Well, we like to wrap up with an homage to our friend James Lipton, dearly departed Mr. Lipton, who ran the Actors Studio in New York City for many years at Pace University, and all of his incredible interviews with, I think, mostly actors, but we've we've borrowed, taken his lead, and there's 10 questions he asked at the end of every interview. So with your indulgence, let's jump right in.
Absolutely.
What is your favorite word?
I thought a lot about this, and I think I settled on amalgam.
Amalgam.
I don't know why. It's just a very mellifluous word. It sounds like it feels good to say. The way the G kind of makes you swallow the L a little bit. It's a very physical word. Has nothing to do with the meaning. I just like the word.
What is your least favorite word?
Oh, that's tough. I really like words, and challenging words I like most of all because they're really interesting. I think probably my least favorite word is maintenance because I cannot spell it to save my life. I don't know. It's so hard. I don't know why.
What turns you on creatively, spiritually, or emotionally?
Honesty. I think in terms of, particularly in terms of art, there is something to be said for the difference between something that is crafted with a degree of artifice and something that is maybe less well put together, but is done earnestly.
What turns you off creatively, spiritually, or emotionally?
The idea that things have to be a certain way. I think, a lot of the challenge you spoke to earlier about resistance or difficulty discovering new music has a lot to do with composers in the 19th century who told everyone that Beethoven needed to be put on a pedestal and you needed to be quiet during the performance and you could only clap at the end of the piece, never in between movements, and all of these ridiculous rules that are so outdated and were outdated in their own time. It's embarrassing, and I wish we could move on.
What is your favorite curse word?
This was a tough one for me too, but I thought a lot about it. I think it's bollocks. Because it's not a curse word for us, so I feel totally comfortable saying it really in any situation, including this one. And I wish that I could say it with the intensity that an English person says it with, or an Australian for that matter.
What sound or noise do you love?
Rain. This was an easy one. Especially very quiet rain on an interesting surface. So I think like tin roofs, or if you're sitting under a gazebo or something and the rain is following, it's rhythmic, but you can't count it, right? It's rhythmic, but it doesn't line up.
What sound or noise do you hate?
High-pitched sounds bother me a lot. Like when there's one very high-pitched sound, I sometimes it feels like I'm not sure it's there, and it makes me feel a little crazy.
What profession other than your own would you like to attempt?
When I was a kid, I wanted to be an archaeologist. I saw Jurassic Park and I was like, oh, that's awesome, dinosaurs. And I still love dinosaurs.
Sure.
But in terms of what I'd like to attempt, I don't know. It would be something else creative. I tried to get into streaming and things fairly recently, and it was really fun to kind of put those things together.
What profession would you not like to pursue?
Service industry. I have so much deep, abounding respect for people who can work, particularly in food service. Food is so important and sacred to me, and I'm constantly afraid that I will ruin something or spill on somebody. Or I worked at a coffee shop while I was in Baltimore at Peabody. I hated every minute of it. I just wanted to work behind the register and mop, because I just do not put me behind the bar. It is terrifying. I have so much respect for anyone who can do that.
And lastly, if heaven exists, what would you like to hear God say when you arrive at the pearly gates?
I think I would like to hear that I made someone else's life just a little better.
Doesn't get any better than that. Thank you, Colin. Stay safe and be well. Now it's my time to get emotional. Big hug for your wife, Carissa, and special hug for baby Sophia. Thank you to our technical support team, producer Abby Cecina, technical director Sam Cecina. Until next time, that's it for Artist Alchemy. Don't forget all the other great Yuba Sutter Arts virtual events coming up on Facebook this Thursday evening at 7 p.m. We'll be talking to local music legend and perennial concert favorite, John Paris. We'll be chatting, and he'll be performing a little bit of accordion music that got him started back in the polka days in Pennsylvania and led him to a career as a band leader and a great pianist who's performed at Carnegie Hall because he practiced, right? What's the joke? How do you get to Carnegie Hall?
Practice, practice, practice.
All right. Thanks, Colin. Until next time, see you all later.
Thanks so much.